Welcome, everyone, to the Your Energy First podcast. I'm your host, Emily Marie, and it is such a pleasure to have you here today to co-create with you in this space and to talk about all things your energy. Welcome back to the podcast, everyone. It is so great to co-create with you today. And we are in for a pretty cool experience because in this podcast episode, I'm interviewing a friend of mine, Cathy Mesick. Her and I met about 10 years ago in an energy class, and she's someone who I call to talk shop with. And we go over a number of different topics. But to start, we're actually co-creating together. Her and I are both holding space for the Inner Light Circle group, and then for folks who listen to this as a podcast episode or on YouTube later. And I'm excited about that. It's fun to really hold a strong grounding and clearing energy, especially with someone else. It's powerful. And we actually talk about what it means to take care of your home from an energetic level, what attracts things that aren't so pleasant, what can we do to clear those things, because everybody can clear negative energy from their home. Also, just a plug, I have a course on my website, how to raise the vibration of your home and clear negative energy. I'm supposed to plug my own stuff. I feel like I don't do it enough, but whatever. We're just going to keep going with the flow. And I like talking to Cathy about, we even cover, why are we all here? How do you develop your intuition? What does hearing your guides sound like? It's different for everyone. And she does a great job explaining it. We also talk about some of the trends that are happening right now in the world, including how things are unveiling with the school system. So I look forward to getting your feedback and input on this podcast, and what other topics would you like to cover, me to cover, to have guests cover. I have the lineup pretty much for the rest of the year it's sort of in that energetic lingering space, and I'm excited about it. I'm excited to bring forward more people who not just are energy intuitives, but who are bringing energy and their intuition into their day-to-day life. And I like Cathy's story for a number of reasons, but one, she did not actually set out to be an energy healer. And she talks about that journey. And I think it's such a beautiful way to understand that we do not always have the answers. And there's a reason for that. There's a reason for that. So checking in with yourself, how is the back part of your energy right now? Are you in a receiving mode for your highest good? Oh my gosh, the guys are totally giving us a hard time. They're like, of course you're not, but we're bringing it to your attention. It's like party, which is actually kind of what we talk about. What Cathy talks about when I interview her is keeping it light, having fun, being playful. It's part of the process. Okay, so paying attention to the back part of your energy field, you can literally just acknowledge it, say hello to it. Acknowledge your inner light. Maybe ask your inner light to kind of fill up the space behind you, fill up the back part of your energy field. What does it feel like? If you don't feel anything, that's okay. What do you notice, or what do you just know? And feeling into that, giving yourself a clarity, a clean, the guides say it's clean, like it's crisp, which is funny because the energy doesn't feel crisp, but the intention is crisp, that you'll receive exactly what you need for your highest good, which is really, really cool. And we are all expanding all the time. So it's an honor to be a part of your journey. And thank you for those of you who have reached out, who have shared, who I'm sure reached out and thought this is going in a black hole, or I shouldn't send this. It's brave to talk about energy and intuition, because I do believe all of us here in this community are doing our best. I know we are, because those are the kind of people and souls that I attract, the people who are working on their light and doing their best. So thank you for being here. I see you. I acknowledge you. You're a badass, in case nobody told you that today. And let's get into this interview. So it is so wonderful to have you here, Cathy.
Oh, thank you, Emily.
Yeah, such an honor to hold space with you and co-create with you and everybody else who's joining from the Inner Light Circle community and everybody who's going to be listening on this podcast. Cathy, why don't you introduce yourself?
Okay, well, my full name is Cathy Mesick, and the name of my business is just as it sounds, Cathy Mesick Energy Intuitive. And I do energy healing. It's a broad term, if you will, about
Sure is.
It's all encompassing. But the core of my healing practice is helping my clients just restore to a more centered state of awareness within their body. And that could be translated as chakra balancing, managing stress better, sitting in a place of just stillness, having higher states of awareness or consciousness. Each client has probably a different requirement for like when they come in. They always have intentions, but
yeah, of course.
My focus is always on the same: restore to balance as best I can.
Aw, that's so beautiful. And I've had sessions with you, and I can say that you definitely do that. You hold space for that so well. So
thank you.
One of the reasons I really enjoy working with you and the friendship we've developed over time is because it's so nice that you have such great boundaries and your own personal practice that's so strong that you can really hold really good space for people. And that's not easy to do. Yeah.
Definitely not easy to do. You have to learn that, though. You probably will
100%.
agree with me there. Because when you initially start off on the path of doing energy work or Reiki, we have such a personal attachment. We have an attachment to the outcome. And that's the first, probably say, misstep that we make. But I always kind of use the term, it's a newbie mistake. And that's meant with just compassion and, just grace. But holding those boundaries is it empowers your healing work. It keeps you in a very centered place of empowerment. And you can do so much more work from that place of neutrality, and you stay in your power. So just by being in that orientation of setting very clear boundaries, your clients benefit better. You're not attached to the outcome, and it's empowering for them as well. It doesn't create, I'll say, codependent relationships with, say, client and healer.
Right.
Because the client will oftentimes keep leaning on you, fix me. And I'm like, that's not the role I want to be in. I want to be in the role of holding space, balancing the client's energy, but at the same time, empowering them to reframe the experience so that they can have a different possible outcome going forward, or get onto the right path that they intend to be on and gather wisdom along the way.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. So why do you think we, as our sweet human selves, why do we glom on to healers?
Oh,
and I've done this in the past. I've known you for a number of years. Yeah. By the way, Cathy and I met, I don't even know how many years ago. We were taking energy classes together.
We were. Yeah. A good decade ago.
Yeah, I think it was. I legitimately can't remember the time frame. It's the only thing in my life I can't remember the time frame of, which I think is so funny. So yeah, so why do you think it's in our instinct to kind of glom on to someone who we trust and who we have, you could say, like, I hate to even say good results from, maybe who we co-create well with, an energy intuitive in our own work?
That's a really good question, because I constantly revisit that, because as I'm a teacher, I mentor students as well. And so when I'm teaching students, that's a core teaching.
Right.
I always say, stay in your lane.
Right.
Mind your energy. But I think early on, since, I've done it too, when I was part of it, I think is we are new to the world of energy healing, as say a student of energy healing. And as we practice, it's possibly just not knowing how energy flows through us. And I think it's human nature to defer to somebody else, say in a role of authority,
right,
or more experience. So we'll defer to them as, say, the experts or, professionals.
Yeah.
But the thing, as I realized with energy work specifically, is the more we practice, the more we are empowering ourselves.
Right.
Even in our own healing journeys.
Right.
If we're working through difficult processes, it's all about personal power. How am I using my power?
Right.
Do I say, this is where I use the term guru syndrome in a way. It's like if we are constantly giving our power over to our teacher,
Right.
we're never really fully actualizing, realizing, and embodying a place of personal power. So that's big.
It is big. And for me, growing up, personal power wasn't something I was taught. I was raised Catholic, my degree's in finance. I mean, I think this is common for a lot of us, right? Not that specifically, but the structure.
It is the structure. It is the paradigm of, I'd say, the reality that we live in, societal structures. There's always, we defer to governance.
Yeah.
Something or someone else is governing. So we're not really used to taking responsibility for our power, our choices, especially if there's confusion, we'll defer to somebody else. Just tell me what to do.
For sure.
Tell me what to do.
Well, and this is also reminiscent for me. If you go to a doctor, it's like, what's my diagnosis? I could kind of see too how you'd go to an energy intuitive and say, well, what's my diagnosis? How do I fix this? And then that's when you start doing the inner healing work in that journey. And it's like, whoa.
Right.
So
that's true. And I think like with Western medicine, that's exactly it. We have a mystery on our hands and we're looking for a diagnosis and then we treat it.
Right.
And that works when it's appropriate, diagnosis, treat it with, intervention methods.
That's true.
So it has its place.
Yeah.
But if we're talking getting underneath and get into the nitty gritty of things, which is typically energy, the foundations, it is, how am I creating this illness or disease in the first place? So again, it comes back to self-reflection, looking inward, looking at our thought patterns. The universe is a mental universe. Everything is created through mind, intention, with will. And so I always be mindful what's happening in the thought field because it can create things that we don't intentionally want to create.
It's so funny you say that because it was a couple podcasts ago, maybe it was my last podcast. I don't remember, but I remember saying if you were to put in front of me an entity of the dark, I think I use the example of a demon and free will scares me more than this entity because free will is powerful. And that gets back to the whole personal power and how powerful we all are. I think that's one of the most difficult things in this line of work. And I would like your opinion on this, but when a client comes to you and they're dealing with things and you do have to kind of get down to the emotional state, why is this happening? Why is this something that's, manifested, created in life? And it's not always the easiest thing to face for someone to say, oh yeah, this is really what I need to change on the inside. And that's why I always tell clients, outside of dealing with a trauma or a tragedy, doing self work, self inner healing is a brave, brave journey. It's a really brave journey. So
yeah, this is where you have to have courage, which means heart.
Yeah.
I'm usually really tactful. It's always case by case when I have to address some more difficult issues. But I want them to be curious. I always say, get curious about the world we live in. Look for underlying patterns. And a lot of times it's just thinking just beyond the surface details. Ask questions, just get curious. Be curious about the world we live in. And look for meaning and be cognizant of how fear shows up. I mean, they all dovetail into each other.
Of course.
So if there's somebody's working through, say, a cancer diagnosis, that's a tough one. People don't want to manifest cancer.
Of course.
They just, I wouldn't approach it from like, well, there's somewhere in the thought field that this happened.
Right.
But I say, okay, so I treat present moment. I never look in the past. But I do ask questions and like, okay, so in order to reset the energy and balance the energy wherever that cancer is showing up in their body, I start having them understand the energy map of the human body. I explain to them the role of livers and kidneys and hearts and the thyroid. And I just start having them realize that we are very dynamic, energetic beings and the role of chakras. So wherever the cancer is in the body, I say, so we have uterine cancer. I'll just sit with it, have them say, all right, so, and I say that sits really close to the second chakra.
Mm-hmm.
And then I explain to them the role of the second chakra. So it's about educating them,
Of course.
about the chakra system, what it
Yeah.
processes. And then I start, I hopefully bring them along with this educational process and explain emotionally what the role of the second chakra is, the mental structure of the emotional or the second chakra, the spiritual component of the second chakra. And I start layering in these pieces, and I say, are there any thoughts or emotions or experiences that have destabilized that chakra in your life? So it gets them thinking about possibly low self-esteem, which does show up in the second chakra. So it's an exploratory conversation.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I also say the mind is a powerful vehicle here to repattern these energy systems.
Right.
So I'm always responding to my client's response system. It's like,
Of course.
I read them like a book. I might be hearing a bigger story from spirit.
Totally.
And I'm very careful. Like I might be hearing, say, a very true story that's happened here. And depending on the emotional well-being of my client, I either just spill it and just say, this is what your guides are saying, or I'm a little more tactful and gentle in the process.
Do your guides give you, and we're going to get into how you developed this, your own intuitive skill set and energetic skill set, but do your guides give you any sort of indication when you're supposed to, sometimes they give you the full story so you can help your client. And then sometimes they say, give the client all of the information. What's your tell to know when you're supposed to ease into it versus when they say, hey, we need you to give them everything right now?
Really good question. That's discernment. That's a discernment filter.
And letting go of ego too, for me as a practitioner.
That's true. Always check the egos. We got to make sure that's a given. I feel it in my body. I mean, I can start feeling a story that's like, oh, this is what's going on here.
Yeah.
I also know my clients fairly well, typically.
Yeah.
But my guides I can kind of feel like this is the truth. This is truth here.
Yeah.
But I can kind of feel, but share just this amount.
Yes. Yeah.
I can feel like the story, and they'll just kind of like a softer version of the story. I can actually feel it instead of like, and I definitely have clients who I can tell it's the harshness, I think is what I can, it's the energy frequency. It's like, if they want me just to say truth and lay it out on the table, I can just feel like, boom, I can just feel like just lay it out and just go with it. And I'm like, all right, here we go. But there's it's reading, it's hard to even put a word to it, but it's the tone of the information. If it feels like it's just coming in really, it's like, all right, we're just going to be totally just let it go, let it fly. But if there's a gentleness to it, I can feel let's just go a little more gentler with this, this information.
I love how you describe that. You and I have not covered this topic specifically before, what it sounds like. And this is why I have this podcast and this community as well, is because I want a place where we can talk about energy, because how do you describe it when every energy is so nuanced? And what you just described, makes sense to me because I hold space too. But at the same time, you did a great job describing it. It's like, how do you put your finger on it? So,
because what we're talking about is something that's really outside of linear language.
Of course.
To me, and this is something I learned and adapted to in my practice, is everything's a hologram. When my guides show me imagery, it's a hologram. I'm feeling all the mental, emotional, physical, spiritual layers to the imagery. Yep. So I'm getting a full 360 and more storyline. But when they really want me to just spill it, like in a very truthful way, I guess it's the directness that comes through in that hologram. It's just it comes through very strong. And then I just say it for what it is.
Yeah.
And sometimes I do a little caveat with my clients, like, all right, the guides are going to go really direct.
Totally.
So here we go.
Totally.
Fair warning.
I don't know about you, but I feel for me, the energy as of late, maybe in the last 6 months, has been a lot more direct than usual. Notice that? It's kind of caught me off guard.
It is. And I almost get I'm even asking my guides right now about that.
Yeah, totally.
Bringing that up.
Totally.
And the information that's coming through is there's an impatience kind of woven into a lot of the work we're doing right now. Not from us per se. It's just our clients are in a place of they're ready to just shift. The shift is now. We have to start shifting now. There's kind of like an urgency, if you will.
Yeah.
I don't know where that's right.
Which kind of makes sense if we look at the direction our planet's headed. And I'm sure a few other things, we definitely have to make some changes, but we signed up for this beautiful work. So how did you know that one day you were going to have an amazing studio in Fremont, in Seattle, and be seeing energy clients? Can you walk me through a little bit of that journey? Because it's easy for you and I to sit here after, doing this work for however long we've been doing it. I don't remember, but for me, you and I did not get started like, it's the path of an energy intuitive healer. So tell me a little bit about your journey, how it kind of started.
Oh my gosh. I do laugh because when I do share the authentic version, I kind of crack myself up a little bit.
Yeah.
I had no intentions of being a healer.
That's so great.
No intentions.
Yeah, no, I know.
It started off, I was taking college courses to be a paranormal investigator.
Stop it. You can actually do that?
Yeah, college courses. I don't know if he's still teaching it now, but it was with a pretty high profile paranormal investigator here in town.
That's hilarious.
And so there's definitely psychical research. I mean, there's definitely college courses for this. And Shoreline Community College at the time in 2009, I think.
Oh my gosh.
Was offering courses there. And so I took it with this guy, and I took it 3 times. I mean, it was just such a cool course.
Yeah.
So I found my way into Reiki kind of through that course, because as you start diving into this world of metaphysics, the term Reiki was coming up. He was an actual healer. His business card wasn't just paranormal investigator. He had, I can't remember exactly what it said, but it had medicine healing, or it was like he was shamanic practice.
Sure.
I'm like, what is that?
Yeah.
So in the course of Googling a little bit, and at the same time, I was also going through some personal life changes. I started hearing about past life. Oh, we have more than one life.
Right.
So, and I think the universe just kind of through serendipity, I thought, oh, I'm going to have a Reiki session.
Yeah.
Oh, this is cool. I can actually feel this. And then I thought, so while I'm taking the paranormal courses, I'm also going down this path of Reiki, and thought it was just totally cool. I couldn't see anything. I could feel just a little bit because I had Reiki attunements. I went and got Reiki attunements.
Sure.
And woke up to that. And then I thought, I'm just going to play with this.
Yeah.
I was the D student in classes for quite a while. That's how I met you. I was still a D student.
No, you were not. You always had such a bright light, and your perspective was always very, I mean this in the nicest way. It's like when you see a huge rock, like I'm talking rock bigger than human, big as a house, whatever. Like you always gave me this energy. It was just like steadfast, calm, centered. Wow. And I was always really appreciative when you spoke up in class.
It wasn't very often.
That's probably why I like
it. I always approached it from a place of probably just a new student. I'm just learning from the right from the ground up. I was having to build foundation.
Sure.
So I really put a lot of I practiced all the time though, Emily. I came home and practiced every night doing distant healing work. I mean, that's where my intuition grew the most. Never thinking I would practice this, but I thought, I'm going to practice. I want to be intuitive. So I practiced distant healing, and my third eye, just through distant work, really grew.
Yeah.
But of course, down the years, I think it was, so got my attunements in 2009, 2012, I started working professionally.
Wow.
I just felt the momentum just to keep practicing that I can do this.
Yeah.
And here I am. But I was pretty insecure in the beginning because I thought when I started, I couldn't hear my guides, just letting you know. Couldn't hear my guides. I could see things a little bit, just trusting in the knowing.
Yep.
My hands were my eyes. I could feel energy through my hands. And that's how I started off.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And I love how you shared the piece about your guides too, because earlier you were sharing that beautiful example of how they come through with,
Mhm.
bigger stories versus letting information trickle in. And
Yeah,
I think that is one of the biggest misconceptions out there that we're all figuring out is that you can take your time and practice this. And if you practice and are consistent and are well intentioned, which everybody listening to this
hmm
is, it is going to grow and grow and grow. It's like an energetic muscle. So nobody will be
it is a
left
muscle.
out.
And you said it perfectly. It is a muscle, and you have to practice it and stretch it, just
Yep.
grow into these abilities
Yep.
and let go of expectations.
Yeah, that's hard
Um,
for humans to do.
oh, gosh. Yeah, because the world of energy, I mean, you talk about social media and other healers that we know,
Yep. Good and
we
bad
want
ones,
to,
by
we might, and the bad ones,
the way.
I think there's a misconception out there that once you say set up shop or you start practicing,
Right.
automatically you're going to be able to see and hear your guides
Sure.
and patience.
Yeah.
And it does eventually happen. I mean, I
Right.
think it was about, gosh, I want to say almost 5 years before I actually heard my guides.
Aw.
That's a long time of practicing before I actually like, oh, that's my guides. I mean, because that was just like I stopped almost in my tracks, like, oh my gosh, I can hear
What was
them.
that moment like? How did you know it was your spirit guides, your spirit team versus Cathy?
Yeah, my ego or my mind.
We love our ego, don't we? It's such a
I
great
know.
teacher.
They're adorable.
All versions of it.
All versions. Well, it's interesting how, and it's such a subtle, for me, this is just my experience. I don't know what it's like for anybody else,
Sure.
but just doing work with, clients, and I could feel their emotions. That was pretty clear. I could feel their emotions. I was getting visuals and I was seeing symbolism. I create my map of symbols. And so I was able to see things, and my guides are working through the imagery.
Mhm.
I can feel emotions trapped in the body. So I was definitely reading my clients. And then there was like another voice all of a sudden coming in there. I'm like, that is not my voice. That wasn't my thought. It came in really quick, and I backed up again. I kind of stopped,
Mhm.
and I was like, I actually looked up. I'm like, is that you guys? Yeah. Because it
Are
was
you following
different.
me?
Like, are you following me? But it was just a little bit different. It wasn't my thought. And of course, I was just so waiting for that day.
Yeah.
And I noticed, because I read a lot and I research consciousness a lot too. So there was a lot about meditation and how you just suspend the mind, intellect.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
like when for thinking, the thoughts are right here in the prefrontal cortex. It's like
Yeah.
if you make a grocery list, I can feel the words right here up front. Even as I'm talking, I can
Right.
feel everything's like in the front half of my face. My guides, when I heard them, were back here
Mhm.
behind me.
Yeah.
And that was the difference. I was like, oh, and I finally was able to map it. I'm like, oh, it's not coming from my mind or my inner ear, my human ear. It's coming from a spiritual energy center.
That's interesting because of the hours of conversations you and I have had. We actually haven't talked about this
We
yet. So
never talked about
this gets me excited because, one of the
it.
ways they've taught me to teach this, and they let me know that this is not blanket for everyone, but that you will sense them in the lower back part of your head.
Yeah. Yeah. It's right back here.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, we have our human ears. So there's like this channel, I call it like the back channel of our energy field. And that's
Right.
where all of our psychical information is really coming through. And we're just
Mhm.
filtering it and
Yeah.
speaking it.
Yeah.
So you're right, it sits in the back, and the
Yeah.
throat chakra governs the clairaudience. So
Mhm.
it's right back here, right back of the head.
One of the things that I will suggest for people is to get into the flow state, like a flow state, so that you can perceive them, right? We say hear, but really it's perceiving, right? What would you call your flow state? What's Cathy's flow state?
Ooh.
From the, and I'm talking about like when you
Mm-hmm.
wake up in the morning and then when you're in a client session, is it any different?
Mm-hmm. Not really. There's varying degrees of flow state. And it's how far, this is, you're going to have me use human language. This is where it gets tough. to describe this inner space, if you will.
Welcome to the chaos of all of us trying to describe energy.
It's multidimensional.
All
Right?
welcome here.
It's not linear.
No, it's definitely not.
So a true flow state for me is being totally disconnected from the intellect. And I'm not in my intellect at all. I am actually moving in a flow channel aligned with through my heart. It's this, I sit further and I call it the back channel, and I'm plugged in and I'm totally in the present moment out of time and space. So that's optimum. Like when I'm doing my healing work here in the studio, I am sitting very aligned in that channel. I'm out of ego, completely out of ego. And just in this, I call it the seat of power or seat of observation, And you can feel the difference in the body where when you are really in that state, it's very relaxed, very relaxed.
It's very high vibrational. It's very comfortable.
And you can actually tune to different frequencies very easily in that flow state. And it's in a complete place of relaxation, allowance. There's no fear. Fear is grippy. But for me, like when I wake up though, I'm still waking up and going about my day. And so if I'm dealing with emails and, daily life, I want to be leaning a little bit forward into my human aspect and, my human self, making choices and decisions and paying bills. And so I'm leaning into my humanness, if you will, which isn't totally flow state because there's an integration there. But if I want to go about my human life is in a flow state as much as possible, I just lean further back into that channel and I can still pay bills, but there's zero attachment. It's a little difficult to stay mindful of time.
I can see that.
So we are blended beings. So we're just going to kind of ease and flow in that variable of how much do we lean into our humanness.
Yeah.
So I always say bring your spirituality, your spiritual self into everything. So that keeps it easier where your flow state's more present, as opposed to saying, just save your spiritual life for Sundays. Or, they always, like in church, they'd say, go to church on Sundays. What happens the rest of the week?
Yeah. That's a good analogy, actually.
I know. I grew up as a Catholic too. So, it's like, just go to church on Sundays and
wipe that slate clean.
Right. And then you have the rest of the week. What happens? But I'm like, so for me, I try to walk my talk every day. I stay as centered as I can. We're human. And I try and just keep that flow state very present.
Yeah.
Don't worry about the future. Don't regret the past. Just stay present as much and embodied, fully embodied as much as possible. That's flow state.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, we could do an entire episode on flow state alone.
Oh gosh, you and I could talk hours on that.
Yeah, and many, many other things. So if you're someone listening to this podcast and they are thinking, well, I really enjoy energy and energy work, but maybe being a healer isn't my future, but it's more about integrating my true self, my spiritual self, my energetic and intuitive self into my day-to-day, into, career, parenthood, all those things. What would you suggest for someone like that?
That is beautiful, actually. You don't have to be a healer. Bringing our spirituality into our day-to-day lives, it's a practice. We're blended beings. We're not just humans. We're spiritual beings, as the saying goes, having a human experience. So when we lose that connection to our spiritual being, our body, a higher mind or spiritual body, we can feel lost and we get easily influenced by the external world. And we get kind of sucked into that vacuum.
Right.
So by always remembering at the very core of who we are, that spiritual being having a human experience, if we create that daily practice of basically nurturing and cultivating that relationship with spirit, however that looks to you, you are reminding this body that you are a spiritual being.
Yeah.
And, It's going to be unique for everybody. I mean, this is such an individualized practice. It's like, because spirit means something different to everybody.
Right.
Their faith is different. Everybody has a different type of faith or belief system.
Right.
But just to bring that into your daily life, it provides grace, patience, unconditional love for the self primarily, which then reflects onto others.
Yeah.
And I think it opens up an opportunity for actually lasting joy. Doesn't make life easy. I mean, life can be hard.
I say it's a little crunchy to get to flow state or aligned state. To go from how you've been operating to get there, it's a little crunchy.
Yeah, crunchy. Yeah. And I think also understanding that there's misconceptions out there, at least in my observation, that when people say, well, I'm going to bring my spirituality into my life, create a practice, there's no guarantees that life gets easier.
I know.
Actually, life can become, to me, it just provides so much more meaning, and it's rich. And that's where the magic lies. Everything you start realizing when you bring your spirituality into every part of your life, you start, at least for me, I'm not speaking from my lens, that you start realizing that there is a magic that sits behind everything, behind nature, behind every human being, behind animals, the whole universe. There is an intelligence and an awareness that sits behind that. It's not just physical matter. And then we are a part of it.
Oh, yes, we are. As you're sharing this, I feel it in my heart space. And I think this is what the world's opening up to right now. And please tell me if you disagree or have an additional observation on this. It feels as though everyone is on this path, their version of it. And we're all being guided to this. I don't know why they're calling it a great awakening, because at the same time, when you look at the universe, it also feels so small. So it's like, on the one hand, it's massive to all of us, and in the big scheme of things, it's like, aw.
You just touched on the meaning as above, so below.
Oh, yeah. Oh, gosh.
Right? There's the macro and the microcosms of our reality. Yeah. And there's a lot of variance in there, as above, so below.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a big concept. But you're right. As we move into this deeper relationship with the cosmos, if you will, we start, I always use the term paper doll. So and now I'll explain why. Okay. In fact, I used it on my client before this little podcast today. When we are operating from a very limited lens or human lens, it feels very linear. It's kind of be very limited in our experience here on the earth. It could be more fear-based, a little more victim energy that kind of weaves its way in.
I don't know what you're talking about.
She's like, yes. She looks away. She looks away, not me.
Yeah. No, for sure. Oh, those lessons, they're fun.
Trust me, I was there too. Yeah. It's just how we orient our awareness. We're not taught this. Yeah. So we are much more reactive just to the world we are in, and it's very disempowering. It's just how we are relating to the world around us. And it seems very surface. Everything's surface. We're just reacting. It's always just reacting to the world, and we keep adjusting, and it's just reaction mode. And then you start asking questions. You start the Great Awakening. I think we're just waking up to a deeper sense of ourself. We're not just on the surface level anymore. All of a sudden, we start moving in and start, what's the meaning of life? Let's just go there. We start asking, is this all there is? And you start asking these more existential questions, even if it's just in your own daydreaming thoughts. Right. That's the curiosity. Is this all there is? Well, no, there's much more. So it kind of launches us into the rabbit hole. Some of us get just thrown into it.
Yep.
But head first, and you're just flailing pretty much. You fall. But what happens is we start letting go of falsehoods about the nature of reality, and we start moving into a deeper relationship with reality,
which is scary.
It's the unknown. It's the great unknown. That's why they call it the great work. This is the great work. There's definitely some masters out there who study consciousness, and this is what they do. They call it the great work because it's basically, we go from, as I call it, the paper doll, which is very linear, and move into this very multidimensional relationship with the cosmos and realizing that we are a part of it, which eventually takes us to, I am the creator of my reality. So we go from very flat 2 dimensions into the multidimensional paper doll that just all of a sudden is just dynamic and multidimensional. We're not just living here on the 3D plane. Right. We're a 4D, we're 5D, 6D, and beyond. Mm-hmm. It's frequency based.
And it's, when I look back on my process, because as we talk about this, I don't want anyone listening to feel as though like, gosh, I don't have this figured out, or I'm not doing the work. Me personally, it was years of back and forth. Like, I remember there's a time where I was like, nope, there's no aliens. Like, that can't be true because I just need to be safe. And everything in between, I'm going to go back to church. I'm going to go back to this and that. I was like, it's too much. It's too much. So, for anyone out there listening, feeling like, I don't know, it's a heavy bag right now, just deep breaths. Everyone's being guided on their journey. There's no mistakes. There's no, you're not figuring out fast enough. There's no, you're doing it wrong. You and I both know everybody's journey is unique. Like, I love what you're talking about because I think it frames it so well for people. And I just want anyone listening to know, like, hey, we're speaking about this because of experience, and it's normal to feel like it's loosey-goosey for a while. Or maybe you got it all figured out.
And keep it loosey-goosey. We're never done learning. I learn stuff all the time through my clients' guides. They inform me. I'm like, oh, I never thought about that. You can only be book smart for so long. You can only study with a teacher for so long. You got to get your hands dirty.
Of course. Oh,
yeah. You got to dive in.
And getting your hands dirty is the practice. So
that's the practice.
Whatever you want to call it, sitting in your power, and there's multiple versions of that. Meditation, multiple versions of that. Energy work, multiple versions of that. And I always say, follow your curiosities. So what would you say to someone who's kind of like, if they're saying, where do I start? What would you guide them towards?
Play. As humans, we take life way too serious.
We do.
And we think it's and we're trained to be that way. When we come in as babies, we're just like a blank slate for the most part. And the world informs us about reality around us. Our parents teach us what the world is, our schools, our governments, our culture that we are born into. They inform us, and then we create belief systems. And most of the times we just take life so serious.
Of course.
And I just say, play. Play. Where do we begin? I'm like, fine. Because when we are children, we are playing. We're outside of time and space. And when we're children, we're most open to creativity. As children, we daydream. We're more into art than we aren't told to be, contain our expressions of dance and singing. Children play, they sing, they dance until they're told not to.
Right.
So adults need to learn to play again, and not take life so serious. We get stuck in the minutia and the details of life, and in the world of just energy, coming back to our spiritual nature, it's eternal and it's very playful. As you know, I'm sure you know this, our guides love to laugh and have fun all the time.
They make me giggle on the podcast all the time. You can't help it. And I'm like, I feel like this is a serious topic and we shouldn't be giggling.
But they want us to lighten up. They want us to lighten up. So where do we begin? Just get curious. Ask why. Why do I do what I do? If I want a different outcome, why am I repeating my patterns? Why? Don't be afraid to try something new.
That's
a lot of times humans are creatures of habit and they love comfort zones. So if we want to create something new, try something different. Get in the habit of, take an art class. I always say, get that right brain going, because When we are serious, we're all in our left brain. It's too logical, too analytical, and it's programmed. I'm listening to my guide, sorry. It's all programmed because we have learned and reinforced the patterns in our left brain. It's like a software of a computer, or just try hardware. Everything's installed. So in order to activate the right brain, I'm always saying, get playful, take art classes, get out in nature. Nature, since as above, so below, nature is our true nature. So the more nature we find ourselves spending time in, it refreshes us. That's a good starting place.
Beautiful. Oh, it makes so much sense, right? And then the doing it is the other interesting part, right? Like getting out of the normal routine. Where do I fit it in? And this weekend, the guides came through for individuals, and it was like, you're going to, it was tough love in a beautiful way, but it's like, you're going to have to schedule it, figure it out, like sort of make the decision to make it happen. And I thought that's great advice, guides. Make time for play for yourself. Make time for activity, for all of it.
I think but this is kind of how I use the practice in my life. When I find, if I start saying I don't have time or I can't, I do like a quick little end of life review real quick. It's like, if this was the last day on earth for myself, would I be happy with saying I can't, or I couldn't, or I didn't have enough time to do this?
That's good.
So I do just a little quick, epitaph reading. And so it's like, that's kind of pushes me through my fear of trying something different. That's partly how I even started my business, just to say, I was so afraid of failure, afraid of like, oh, I can't do this. And I'm like, if I go to my grave and didn't try, I will be very disappointed.
Aww.
So I took the leap. And it has been very rewarding ever since. Hard work, but
right.
Not easy. It's definitely not easy, but very rewarding.
Oh, that's amazing. I didn't know that you did that. I actually do that as well. A little bit different. I'm like, what would 90-something-year-old self say to me? And she's a wise old bird and a little bit of a spitfire.
I was going to say she's probably really sarcastic.
Yeah, just a little bit. So that's beautiful. And so taking a little bit of a segue into guides, spirit guides, what do you think are some of the misconceptions out there? And we're just going to use a broad stroke brush and say, I don't even know how to say it. Just some of those things about guides, like these perceived ideas we have of them versus, I was about to say reality versus your experience.
That's a good one. There's a reality there.
Sure.
It is interesting. I think I was one of them, didn't really know what a guide was. I'm like, what's a guide? Or what their role is in our life. I get asked that question, what's a guide? People want to know what their guides look like, all the time.
What do you think a guide's role is? Spirit guide's role?
For me and in my clients, when I work with them, is number one, they offer unconditional love. It's just, they love us where we're at in this moment unconditionally. There is never any judgment. They offer guidance. They don't tell us what to do. They might propose options. Have you considered this as possibly a new, potential? Right. It's usually an offering. It's like, oh, have you thought about trying chocolate? It's like, that's a good, easy one. It's like, this is about, oh gosh, it came up today. Somebody was asking about chocolate and the guys are going, well, yes, that has antioxidant properties. Let's give that a go. They were really enthusiastic. So there's a little bit of a Q&A thing. They kind of ask, sometimes they just are validating our thoughts. And then I'm always like, did they plant that thought in their head?
Right.
Yeah. It was that.
Oh, that's funny. It is. I think that is one of the things we wish we could rely on our guides for the most, is answers, concrete answers.
I
Make it so
know.
that I'm not in pain when I make this decision. I want to make the right decision. Now,
Yeah.
and then of course there is no wrong decision because wrong.
Right.
But
And my guide's coming in right now. He says, let's say you take a path of, he's trying to say a word. I'm missing the word. Well, so we always, as humans, want to take a path of ease. And he's saying, what say you take a path of dis-ease? In other words, it's uncomfortable and it's painful and has its hardships. And he goes, but as you come through it, he goes, that was the path you were supposed to take. He says humans have this fear of struggle, fear of pain, fear of suffering. So they avoid it at all costs.
absolutely.
He says, but sometimes we have to take the path of dis-ease to come out with the most wisdom and most healing. So, that's, I think that's another misconception that, if we're asking our guides, it's which path to take or which choice to make, because our fear meters in there saying, I don't want to suffer. I don't want to make the wrong mistake.
Yeah.
And that's why we're told there is no wrong mistake.
Yeah.
No matter the path, we will have wisdom that comes out of the experience. So
Yeah.
he's saying right now that oftentimes we get attached to the story. In other words, it puts us in like the suffering story, the victim story. And he says, we get stuck there in the story. And he says, remember, you're not the story. You're not the story. It's the experience. And what did you gain in wisdom? He says, oftentimes you surprise yourself how you got through it.
Every time.
Every time.
So one of the things that I love is, as you were sharing that your guide was speaking with you, there was a word coming through you didn't understand. I think, tell me from your experience, but there's this misnomer. Okay, once our spirit guides are talking to us, clear as day, and it's almost like it's a one-way street a little bit, right? Like they're just gonna streamline a golden light into the back of my head now from what these ladies are talking about and telling me. And they're just going to speak directly to me and crystal clear.
There are times when I am getting very clear information,
Sure.
but like you and I are having a conversation, so I am engaged in my intellect as well. I'm kind of navigating two planes of awareness, if you will. So I will miss words and I'm like, I back up a little bit. I'm like, say it again. Or impress it upon me again so I can feel it. And then sometimes words I just miss. And then I'm like, try a different word. Just try a different word. So you can tell it's very fluid. And, sometimes I probably frustrate them because I'll miss a word over and over again. I'm like, just give me a new word.
Pretzel.
A different word.
I think that that's one of the things that helps us come into our power more as we open up with our intuition more, when we realize, and our spirit guides are our intuition, when we realize that we get to use our own free will, use our own experience to engage with them back. Very interesting. And they're so humble. I mean, they're so humble. It's like, you guys are out here helping, my little human self trying to get through all this stuff, wade through it. And half the time I'm probably not even paying attention to you unless I'm in my flow state. So it's pretty neat to be able to have have this, what you're talking about, which is the back and forth, that I think, again, is one of those misconceptions out there that we don't get to do that.
Yeah. And some people might have a very clear auditory experience with their guides. I remember early on when I was first hearing them, I used to say, I'm thick-headed. You better yell it to me because I'm thick. It's like you have to get through my, my intellect, because I was very science-based before I got into energy work. I've had to really train my right brain. But it's fun. I'm like, just yell it. You have to be really loud.
But I love that, because that is one of the things I love that you're actually validating this for me. Thank you. But that's one of the things I tell people. I'm like, tell them how you want to experience them. Say, hey, I need to be
loud.
Yeah, I need you to be more clear. I want you to come through more often. Like, use your free will to create the experience with them. Yeah. The other thing that, you go.
Oh, so early on also, I used to say, I'd look for signs because I was so having a hard time figuring out how they were going to communicate with me.
Right.
Just kind of give me breadcrumbs. So I had a lot of signs shown to me, and I still have them today that I'd find on the ground. And I go back, I'm like, yep, that was a sign from the guides or the universe, because I had a hard time learning my intuitive abilities. And that's the other thing. I started at ground zero.
Yeah, of course. I mean, isn't that kind of where we all start from? And it's your own personal ground zero, right? I mean, because
some people come in and they're open channels already, but that's the exception, not the rule.
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen that too. It's pretty, I don't know, amazing.
It is.
Can't we just see?
And again, that's their journey. And
right.
A little sidebar here: don't compare yourself to others. That's the other thing too. I think that's where I always thought I was the D student all those early years, because everybody else was just like, oh God, they're all seeing something. They're all feeling something. Totally. I'm just sitting in my little chair. Like, I'm not seeing and feeling a thing.
Right.
But I learned just to stay in my lane.
Yep.
Stay in my bubble, stay in my energy. And you are a receiver of information. Don't go out grabbing it. Just stay in your bubble and let it come to you.
Yeah. That's the integrity piece. It's when I'm in a room with people who are there to experience energy work, and who knows in what capacity, but I know for an absolute fact that every single individual there is, better than me at certain elements, and vice versa, right? Because it's like, it's the way we all cook differently. It's the way we all, do math differently or whatever, but it's supposed to be that way because it's not a better than, it's creation energy. It's magic. And I think it's amazing. And I'm really, really excited for this next wave for people to realize I get to discover my magic, and then I get to bring it into the world in whatever capacity that looks like. So as opposed to being taught, okay, this is how you do it.
Right. And every person is creating their own version of reality, that they're working with their soul.
Yeah.
And creating their life, and they could be co-creating with a partner, their children, their family units, their community.
Yeah.
Again, it just starts rippling out in bigger concentric circles. But at the center of every circle, all those concentric circles, is your spirit. Staying here and, just like you said, create.
And I like what you said about let the information come to you, and then, what do I need to know? Excuse me. You mentioned signs from the guides, and, or tells, symbols, what have you. And then I love how you mentioned, they'd be on the ground. That's the other thing. I think that there's this perception that when our guides are communicating with us, it's going to be profound, but they need to come through to us in ways that don't completely distract us from the human experience.
Right. Don't get lost out in the ethers. Yeah. It's like, this is where we live on the earth. It's very grounded. And I always I'm a Taurus. That's probably why I'm always in the dirt and in the earth.
I have so many Tauruses in my life. It's wild. There's a few on this call.
We're awesome. Taurans are awesome.
Yeah.
But I was just always looking for signs. Plus, I wasn't sure. I was also kind of really paying attention to nature. That was part of my bit there. I was looking for animal signs. I also have a lot of shamanic training. So I'm always looking for nature symbolism.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I was always looking to nature for my signs, my guides communicating in that way. So I was looking at nature. I was listening to the wind. I was listening to, I was looking at the sky, earth, dirt, trees, birds.
I love it.
But they were leaving definitely signs for me in the early days. I mean, they still do,
right?
But it's just a little more mature, I guess, if you will. I don't know, seasoned. I don't even know the right word, but
sure.
But I would look for signs, because I just felt like I was flailing in some ways. But in hindsight's 2020. You'll say, oh, yep, there's a sign. It was there. But people think it's just going to be the heavens open up and the rainbow, or the that classic imagery comes down and there's your sign. I'm like, okay.
Can I get an amen? I mean,
Doesn't
even
look
me knowing I'm walking this path, talking about energy work, it's looking back, I'm like, oh my gosh, it was so obvious. Believe me, it was the least obvious thing to me for a number of years. So,
subtle. And that's the other thing. If we want to hear spirit, we have to quiet the mind. If we are busy, caught up in the external world, which is very noisy,
yeah.
it is noisy, noisy, noisy. We have to be still here,
Yeah.
still in this inner space to hear our guides, to hear spirit, to even hear our higher self,
Yeah.
to tune into these intuitive centers that you're always firing. We're just, if we are too caught up in the noise, the signals in the noise, we just have to get the noise to diminish. And that's where we have to have a practice of stillness and a centeredness of stillness. Get used to being still. Our minds get hijacked pretty easily.
Oh, of course. That's the construct we're in, and that's what they're grinding us towards. And that's why that path of going from where we're at now to alignment and flow can feel a bit crunchy. And it's okay. Like that's one of the things I want people to know. If you feel like you're getting into your alignment, getting into your flow, and it feels uncomfortable, you're not doing it wrong.
Right. Yeah. And again, attachment to, say, timing. It's like, well, I don't want to, it's patience. Spirit doesn't get attached to the hows or the whens.
Right.
It's all in spirit time. It's not human time.
Do you think there's a divine timing to all of this? And how much does human influence play a factor?
Oh my gosh, that is a loaded question,
I know.
Emily.
We just got deep real fast.
You did. We just went there. So this comes down to the nature of, say, destiny or divine timing.
Sure.
And free will. How much influence does the human mind or intention affect things?
Right.
So the longer I practice, we have free will to make little choices like, what we're going to have for dinner, the color of car we're going to buy, the little inconsequential things, really. But I think, this is as I say, I think. So as soon as I think, that's my ego. As personality, I just had to clarify. I think.
Opinions always evolving based on.
Yeah, it's opinions. Yeah. So based on what I've observed and in the conversations I've had with my guides, the bigger things in our life are going to take nudges from spirit or nudges from our soul. Our soul, in my understanding, has kind of mapped out a possible life plan for us. Very fluid, though.
Yeah, right.
Very fluid. Because if we are not in that flow state, we're not going to feel the flow of what's the right choice for us in certain moments. We're going to maybe choose more ego, little desires, as opposed to big desires, capital D. Big desires are going to come through, and it's coming from spirit, your soul.
Right.
Little desires are human desires, and they're very fleeting. They're very trendy. The latest pop culture, this, that, and the other. So, but when we're in that deeper relationship with our spirit, that center channel, we start realizing you can get into the current. I call it like a current of flow where you're following destiny.
Yeah.
So how much free will do we have? Well, if we make a choice that's not on the soul's path, perhaps we might get opportunities to keep coming back to it. That's the spiral. Will come back and it'll keep presenting. A choice will keep presenting.
Right.
There's always opportunities to course correct, if you will.
Yeah.
But ultimately, there is no error here, if you will. But we're also co-creating on a mass consciousness level. With the human together. Family, we're all co-creating.
Yeah.
And then we're also creating on the more personal level, which is the micro level. So you can see how it gets overwhelming really quickly.
Of course it does. And we're here just to be in all of it. Be in all of it together.
So at the center of it all, at the center is our spirit, our true self, authentic. So I always say, live as authentically true to yourself, your heart, free of conditioned programming as possible. And in doing so, it might not be the most popular path for many, like as far as the group think, but it's much more fulfilling.
Yeah.
And so adventurous.
Ooh, adventurous. I like that.
I love adventure.
Yeah. So speaking of the macro lessons and the micro lessons, what trends are you seeing? What patterns are you seeing come up right now in the collective?
The most obvious is, well, the collective is so easily fear triggered. And so I just kind of I can feel into the collective, and it feels just really chaos, very chaotic energy.
I think it's been created that way for a reason.
Yeah. And this has been this way for, I'd say, a good couple thousand years. I mean, this isn't new. But as far as like trends, I do see, okay, this is what my guide showed me a couple years ago. And now I'm starting to see it actually starting to manifest in human societies, is that what we call it the Great Awakening. What's happening there, I can see that there's a larger sector of society that is starting to sit back further and starting to question more, not just taking what is spoon fed. And it is going to cause a lot of disruption. It's going to kind of break people out of their slumber or question certain societal norms. But it's just people starting to just sit back and say, this isn't working anymore. I see it in our public schools. I see that school system, our traditional educational system, is so antiquated and out of date. I mean, it was designed in the 50s, I think, or at least the core of it.
Sure.
And it was about churning out students that could fit into society and be career, lifers in whatever career they chose. And it just kind of creates a cog in a wheel. And the human spirit is breaking free of that paradigm. And so our schools have to catch up to that. So our school models, our educational system is going to probably have to revamp. It's going through some birthing pains.
Right. For sure. For sure.
Yeah. So that's a pattern I'm starting to see. And I see it in children too. I see the children that are being born and up through the younger people. They're just questioning a lot more. They're not really just taking the status quo.
Oh, I feel like they're not putting up with nearly as much as.
No, they're not about. Yeah. And this goes into 20-year-olds too. I mean,
right.
I watched it in my brother's kids, his kids, and they're growing. I'm like, oh boy, the language that they were using, or even in my youngest, is just, you can start tell the language that they're using, that they're questioning they're questioning the system.
Right. And they're choosing themselves and what feels true and aligned for them, which is pretty impactful.
So, it's empowering.
Yeah.
It's very empowering.
Yeah.
So I think that's what we're going to see as far as a collective shift that's happening, is just in how societies are structured and how they support humans. I mean, that's just a simple answer to a very complex question, but I see people too also questioning. I'm listening to my guide. Sorry for the silence.
Oh, no.
Because I bounce ideas. I'm like, does that sound right?
No, they're used to me having moments of silence on the podcast.
Oh, good. I'm like, I got to keep filling this dead air.
Or I'll give you a second here, but go
ahead.
But
I also see that people there's seekers out there. That's the word I was looking for. There's a seeker movement happening. They're seeking more. They're seeking questions or answers to questions that are very key in understanding the nature of reality. It could be just a simple question, but I'm seeing patterns of thought. And you can see it in science too. I follow a lot of science pages, oddly enough. But the fact that we are starting to, the scientists, like the Webb telescope that went out and is photographing the universe, we keep going out further and further, which also shows that we are going into these outer reaches of the known universe, which translates that we're going into the more deeper into our understanding of consciousness. So as we go out, we're actually going deeper in.
Mm.
And they do meet, in that quantum theory, quantum physics. It's the 0 point. I'm not very articulate in science. I'm trying to explain it, but
I think you're explaining it great.
So when you go out far enough, you start coming back to the beginning.
Yeah, it's the balance.
Yeah. Yes. It's like the symbolism of the Ouroboros, the snake eating its tail. In the beginning and the end, the snake. Have you seen that snake? Yeah. The alpha and the omega, the beginning and the end.
It's interesting times.
Very, very interesting. It's exciting.
Agreed.
Stay out of fear. And we're talking about these bigger patterns in society because, we are of a human family, a collective. But I say, don't be in the collective. Sit outside of the collective and observe.
Yeah.
You stay more empowered that way.
Yeah.
Just observe.
Observe, and then you can make the aligned decisions that your soul is meant to make to contribute to the growth of the collective yourself. I mean, when you are growing yourself, you're contributing to the collective.
Absolutely. And people, this is my clients. When I say the people, that's my clients. A lot of times they think when they come in and they start having these epiphanies that, we're all one and we're all connected at some level. And then they want to make a difference in the world. And they immediately go into these bigger thought constructs of like, I got to do something big. I've got to do something big.
Right.
And the guides always say, change here inside, and the world will match you.
Yeah.
Because the outer world is a reflection of all this inner chaos here for most of humanity. So until we get still here, we're not going to see anything really big out here.
Right. Right.
So it's like the ripple in the pond, and like drop the pebble in the pond.
Yeah. I love that. And we'll just all take a deep breath because it does get to be exciting. And I also know what it's like to feel like, man, that feels like such a responsibility. What the heck? Society, school constructs, relationship constructs told me if I did all these things, I would be just fine. So this transition to awareness of, wait, it's a big responsibility. It feels like all of a sudden, but trust you're being guided. What else would you say to someone in that position where maybe they're just like, whew, deep breath. That's a lot.
Deep breath. So keep it simple. You don't have to fix the world. Yeah. I always say, mind your bubble, mind your own energy. Yeah. Focus just here. And it is overwhelming. I will 120% say it is mind blowing. But that's why I always say, stay curious and just study a topic. Yeah. You don't have to go out and just do an overhaul on the self. Right. You're unlearning patterns. I just stay in the seat of neutrality and just observe. No judgment. If there's one thing that's so helpful is no judgment. Yeah. Don't judge yourself and don't judge the world out here. Don't judge your neighbor. Don't judge. Just sit and just observe and just say, and as you know the saying, oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, that one.
Because, yeah. What's the other one? But I always say, yeah, that's interesting.
Oh, that's interesting. Actually, I was thinking of something a little bit different when people ask me for an answer, right? As they're exploring and, we validate each other with our, not always, but when we have energetic experiences, it's, it can be validating to hear other people's experiences, or it can be invalidating. But one of the things the guides always say is it depends. It depends, because based on the experience that each individual is meant to have. So I know that's a little bit of a separate topic from what we were just talking about, but it just reminded me of that. I agree. You're right. That's interesting. And also, like you've said this too, but just being the observer, and then what do I need to know for the highest good?
Yeah. Yeah. For me in this moment. Yeah. And, the world is really difficult. It's hard being human. Yeah. And, we don't have all the answers, and sometimes we're not supposed to have the answers.
Let's actually touch on that for a second.
Yeah.
This is another reason why we doubt ourselves or why we feel like we're doing it wrong, is because the answers don't come right away when we seek them.
Right. The human psyche wants to have an assurance, a guarantee.
Of course.
Because again, it's a fear program.
Right.
So then we get uncomfortable in those liminal zones, of uncertainty. And so it's just, we have to learn to be okay with the unknown.
Right.
Don't have an answer here. Either just keeps us just in a seat of observation and just gathering more information. Sometimes we just need to gather more information and then until we have more clarity, or we might not have clarity until we actually take a couple steps forward in a direction. And then you can always change your mind and always pivot.
Right.
You don't have to go down a certain course. And so, but it's that unknown. Humans don't like the unknown. I don't like the unknown.
Of course.
You just change it into, it's an awfully grand adventure.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's just an awesome adventure.
So many of those adventures happening right now.
Yeah. I got sun coming in here, so I'm going to try and.
Oh, good.
It's all reflecting.
I love how the sun shows up in healing too.
Yeah, it's just blazing. It's reflecting off a building. I hope I'm explaining some of these concepts. And these are big concepts, how to support somebody when they're just starting out in this place of newness.
Right.
And I just say, play with energy too. If they have a curiosity, find it manifesting, the power of the mind. There's definitely a neat, fun book out there. I have a couple of books on the power of the mind. One's by Pam Grout. It's called Emotion.
Or is it E Squared?
E Squared.
That is a great book by Pam Grout.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they have little short exercises in there and how to understand the power of the mind. And another one by Dean Radin called Real Magic. And, some people just poo-poo the idea of magic. And I'm like, the universe is magic. We just write it off as science. Or just,
read.
Just, crazy time, just crazy. You're just crazy. But, you can. So, and Dean Radin is a PhD, and he's a scientist, and he's done experiments and power of consciousness.
Science can only prove what already exists. Pam Grout, E Squared.
That's it. You found it. I didn't pull it up.
That's a fun book. That's a really fun book. So what was the other? I mean, we didn't even cover
we haven't covered. How are we doing on time? We're good. We're
wrapping up.
We're good. We can go for another 15 if you need to.
Okay. So one of the things that you and I also share a common interest with, although we approach it differently, which I love, is house clearings.
Oh, right.
House clearings.
Everybody loves to clear their space.
Yeah. Or they go to a space that freaks them out.
Or there's that.
And I mean, the other thing so I'll take a step back. So when it comes to house clearings, what do you find is usually the reason people either seek you for a house clearing or seek to learn how to do house clearings?
So this goes back to my paranormal investigation days.
PI.
The PI. Yeah, I was a PI. In those early days, I mean, because my practice has evolved over time as I've really sensed into probably some of the core issues within house structures or homes.
Yeah.
Usually there's something occurring in the house that's making the residents feel uneasy. It could be something that we'll label paranormal. It's outside of the normal reality. Knocking on the walls or doors, opening and closing, people seeing some people, even kids will see things like shadows or gosh, they might actually see a ghost. That does happen. So they'll reach out to me and say, I want to clear the home. And that's usually a good instance of when somebody wants their house clear. They want it to go back to normal, quiet. They don't want to deal with it. They want to sleep through the night. Yeah. Or put to rest, some of the fears that's happening in their kids, perhaps. Their kids are experiencing things. Yeah. So those are the things, and you go through them to clear the house. Other times I've had it is where there's been a long illness. So they'll come in and they've come through their healing journey, the illness, and they'll have me come in and just kind of freshen up things. Another one is like buying a new home and just kind of setting it to square one and just kind of resetting the energies after the previous residents. So, and that's pretty common. They'll just come in and just say, hey, and that's a good time to do it too, because if there's no furniture in the space, you can do it and it's empty and you can go in and clear it.
Yeah.
fairly easy, especially if there's residual stuff from the previous tenants.
Right.
So, yeah.
Right. Which there is, and that's normal. I mean, everywhere we go in humanity, there's residuals from humans. So that's to get the ick from that. How often do you see it affecting, and I'm being guided to ask this question, which is interesting, but how often do you see it affecting people's moods, their overall experiences, that kind of a thing?
Probably a lot.
Yeah.
So, it's interesting. I'll say from the houses that have had more entities lurking.
Mm-hmm.
So everything is energy in a vibrational field.
Mm-hmm.
So I've always said, which come first, the chicken or the egg, the entity in the house or the person living in the house?
Right.
So there's, in the course of my work, as with even attachments on people, we might as well let that little cat out of the bag, that humans can have attachments too, not just houses. And it's always a vibrational match. There has to be a vibrational match to have an attachment, even in a house. There has to be some similar frequency of the residents to attract the activity. Not always, though. So there can be residual information, but it does affect the residents. It can affect their moods, their psyche, their ability to sleep. Some of the darker beings that I've encountered can really impact the psyche of the human person, the being living there, the human. I treat them like they're entities. Humans are entities.
Yeah. Well, entities just, I had to get over entity being something of the dark and realize entity is.
Entity is just a spirit.
Yeah.
And we're spirit. So
right. We're entities.
The humans, the beings, the living. I don't know if that lines up with your house cleaning practice as well.
Oh, yeah, actually. It does. All of it. So I do love, for me, it makes my heart soar a bit when people get the validation for themselves once the clearing's been done and they feel better. Like I wasn't crazy.
That's a big thing. A lot of times there's such a stigma around some of these experiences and people just say, oh, you're just crazy.
Right.
Or you might have a spouse that totally discounts what the other spouse is experiencing and just, you're crazy. Or they say, no, nope, not going to hear it. No. So if they just deny it, it doesn't exist.
Totally.
And so I've seen a lot of wide variety of responses to this type of experience or experiences for people. And I've learned a lot because I'm still a part of some paranormal investigation groups. I still follow. You have to keep learning.
Right.
So I've learned about the types of hauntings that can still occur. And what I have come away with is that this is where that frequency matches within the residents, that, what's attracting what here.
Right.
So, but once you clear the house, I usually want to empower the residents and how to keep that space clear for themselves, empower them to own their power, take claim of their space, and set thresholds and boundaries for their space. It's taking ownership, and it's the same for their bodies. So like I always say that this body of ours is the first house, and the house we live in is our second house.
Yeah. And then there's our car.
And then there's your car. Yeah. Bubble your car.
So one of the things I always think about in this situation is sometimes we just don't know. Right. And then we know.
Right.
And then we get to, and then it launches us into our power because like heck, we're going to let the boogeyman back in.
Right.
So we better figure out our power. One of the things for me in my life that's taught me a lot is when I've faced adversity in the energetic realm. I've learned what my abilities are. There's other ways to learn it too, but that's been one way. I do want to put a pin for a moment in our conversation and say, when we are living with individuals who don't always believe us, if they don't believe you, oftentimes that comes from a space of, I don't have an answer, or my job is to protect the family, and I don't know how to protect the family from something like this because it's not yet common knowledge. So it can be tough.
And it doesn't line up with their belief systems.
Right. You're being very pragmatic about it. Oh, what was that? Did we just get a hello from something down the hallway? I know
Yep.
I don't know if anybody just heard, there was like a slight crashing sound. Not
Yep.
Kathy's space is well taken care of, believe me. But so getting back to, that vibrational and that, meeting the vibration. So that we don't send anybody into panic mode. Let's look at this two ways. How would you suggest, and by the way, at the end of this, Kathy's gonna let you know where you can find her. She does remote sessions and in-person classes and in-person sessions. But what would if someone says, oh crap, I've been in a low vibrational place the last 4 years, and maybe they're living alone, they're single, or I live with a grouchy pants and they're responsible for all the ish that comes in the door. I just know it. So I guess let's talk about energetic cleanup of our own
Housekeeping.
first. Yeah. Yeah.
So, especially if you're living with somebody else or kids, it's understanding the emotional makeup of everybody. And so, essentially, if you can only let's say you live in a shared housing situation, you can't do the work for your housemate, but you can take care of your own space. Even if it's a shared space, a living space, if you have a spouse, you have a shared bedroom, you can still go through and clear it. You can clear the house and just we're training the energy of the house to hold a certain structure and vibration.
Yeah.
And that's what we're doing for our own bodies. We're training our energy and awareness to hold a certain frequency with boundaries. We're just training our energy. So is knowledge is power. Understanding how the energy in the body flows and how to keep, a solid energy field around your body, grow your light, grow your power. And then training your house the same way. And your housemates don't have to understand what's going on. It's just you go in and you can set the intentions, you set your thresholds, bless it. It's all about gratitude, thanking the house for being sanctuary and shelter, providing a warm home for everybody. So it takes it out of being fearful, but into gratitude and just being thankful for what this house is doing for you. But yeah, sometimes
houses have energy. That's another
they have a personality too.
In our culture has not been taught. I know in other cultures they teach it, but in our culture they've not taught us that and they have personalities. I mean, and walls sometimes, like you can have one wall with an attitude and all the other walls are in a great mood. It's like,
yeah. So it goes back to that concept that everything is energy, and there is an awareness in everything. Everything. There's nothing that's benign that it doesn't have awareness. Everybody says, well, a rock doesn't have consciousness. Maybe not at our level, but there is an awareness within that rock.
of course.
The cosmic consciousness.
Right.
It's still creating its reality. Now, so back to the house, it's just work with what you have and understand that a lot of it can be a skeptic. Try and debunk everything that's going on. I mean, if there's actually some stuff that you're experiencing, it could be just ungrounded wiring in the house. Maybe the electrical box needs to be rewired because, electrical units can create weird stuff in the head.
Right.
So not everything is paranormal. That's why I've learned in paranormal groups, not everything is paranormal.
Right. It's funny that you say that. I don't want anyone to listen to this and panic. We share this because information is power. And I would say start by aligning with connecting to your inner light, sitting with it, and then saying, lead me to the answer on what's causing XYZ. What would you recommend, Cathy?
Exactly. Before you even just sit in your place, I always say there's usually a place in the home that feels like sanctuary. Like it's where you sit down and read your books, or the kitchen is usually a nice gathering place because we're cooking. It's where we create through love. And just sit there and look at the home and just sense and trust intuition and just see where it just needs sprucing up. You can light a candle. Light brings in spirit. Light a candle. set
Yeah.
intentions. I use copal as one of my main smudging resins, and I just go around and just go room by room, and I just go around the room. Oh gosh, you can use bells and chimes. It's just, you're breaking up stagnant energy.
Yeah.
It's very easy, especially in spring cleaning. Open the windows. That's why after illnesses, when I do people who've had illness, I'll go in and make sure you open the windows.
And there's hospice nurses who open windows when a soul's crossed over too. Moves the energy.
Yeah. Helps them transition easier.
Or probably just lightens the vibration of the room.
Yeah.
After all that.
All this leads into other aspects of just spiritual work,
Right.
But clearing houses, not everything's going to have, a boogeyman. We're in the month of Halloween, and that's the popular theme this month is all the horror stories. So,
right.
And I did just teach a class a couple weeks ago on house clearing. We went and did a client's house, and
cool.
And it takes a lot of work, but I basically was instructing my students in how to stand in their power, create that, again, that light relationship with their center light. And we worked on that for a bit, just so that we all felt aligned and empowered. Because once you're in the light, you're shifting the vibration of the house.
Yeah.
We're standing in alignment, and that's key. So if there's a house that's experiencing some things, how's everybody holding their light? Is there a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety? Has there been illness, an argument? Everything drops the vibration. And it's not to avoid confrontation. It's just know how to shift out of it and not live in those spaces.
Right.
Don't live in anger. Don't live in resentment. Don't live in anger. I already said that. Or fear.
Right. Well, and it's, which households in America anyway, and I know this podcast goes to other countries too, but which houses is everybody cognizant and in their light? I mean, this is a practice. And, you can also, if I can feel for some folks, there might be a little bit of like nervousness or trepidatiousness. Ask your light to help clear for you. I mean,
Absolutely. Light is powerful.
Oh, the light always prevails.
The light over dark. Light over dark. And another key thing here is absolutely no fear. No fear. We're taught fear. That fear is a learned response.
Yeah.
And it's taught to us. So it's like, check the fear. Just leave it at the door. And just come in there with curiosity. Once again, curiosity.
Yeah.
What's here? And if something does startle you, that startle's okay, but not fear, because it drops your vibration real quick.
Yeah. Let's bring back the no fear shirts from the 90s.
Oh, I remember those. Yeah.
No fear. Drop back into the light. I will share when I get in my head about something, when I'm triggered, my inner child or whatever is triggered, I spend a few minutes in my light, and it's like, just, you're in this beautiful golden meld of euphoria. And it's like, oh, no fear.
Yeah.
I see how I was being so human.
And the humans by default are fearful.
Right.
So, and it's, again, it's conditioned within I think just down through the timeline of the humans on Earth, we're afraid of the dark.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
we have good reason to be afraid of the dark. That's the other thing. When you're raised a certain way, like we all were, which was don't trust your imagination. And people lovingly raised us thinking they were doing right by us by teaching us not to believe our imagination. But we did see things as kids. I'm sure most of us perceived things.
I was afraid of the dark as a kid.
I still have to have closet doors closed because there was so much closet.
Gosh. I think I'm probably sadistic. Sometimes I'll intentionally go walk down a dark street just to say, all right, I'm not afraid of the dark.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I intentionally will go just go walk or walk through my place in a complete darkness just to walk through the dark.
This is coming up, so I'm going to share it. But one of the things is one of the ways you can know you're on the right path with a clearing, or like, okay, something around me is trepidatious something around me is not good, but I'm in my light, my heart rate will go up. Now, that's not the only reason our heart rate goes up. Our heart rate goes up for a number of different reasons, like if your energy is expanding. but I'm like, okay, my heart rate's going up because my light's doing a little bit of extra work because there's some not greatness around, but I'm in my light, so I'm fine. And when you're in your light, you are totally fine. Now, if you go dipping your toe in curiosity pond over there, you've just used your free will and crossed that abyss.
Right. So that's a good point. You don't, oh my gosh. Yeah. So sometimes there's the overconfidence where, like you say, it's like we think our white light is going to shield us from, let's say you walk into an angry mob.
Right.
There is, you might be in the light, but then there's also physical mechanics here that you might get jostled around a little bit.
Right.
But so, I mean, sometimes I have a person in mind that I'm thinking of here. No one knows this person, but who would kind of test fate a little bit, and I'm like, and, for whatever reason, I'm like, yeah, how'd that work out for you?
Right.
So it's like, you have to have prudence. You just have to have common sense sometimes, but from a soul perspective, everything goes, it's like,
Oh, that's a whole other topic we could go down.
I know. But back to house clearing, I just say, keep it simple. Don't overcomplicate it. And I always say, I'll go through it with you. I'll walk through a house with, I always, like my students, I'll say, I'll clear a house with you. Yeah. Buddy systems are good.
They are. We need those training wheels for sure.
Buddy systems are good. Yeah. So,
and I do have on my website a course called Raise the Vibration of Your Home and Clear Negative Energy, but it teaches you how to do it if anyone is curious about it. So Cathy, what are final thoughts?
Yeah, we're wrapping it up. I'm looking at my clock.
Final words of wisdom, final thoughts. Anything you would love to share with anyone, or the guides even have to share? Their sweet wisdom.
They're a chatty bunch. They'll just keep talking.
The faucet has been turned on. It's been left on.
They'll just keep going. I think for the most part, it's just have fun with this topic. Sometimes we get lost in the story of suffering or the story of trying to heal.
Yeah.
And the guides right now are coming in. My guide is saying that
they just honked.
Just kidding. I know. I have a window open.
I do too. I don't know what I was thinking.
Yeah, I'm right down here in Fremont. It's busy. Soundtrack for Fremont.
Yeah, it's all good.
So sometimes we get kind of stuck in the quagmire of a healing journey.
Sure.
It's like, and it always feels like I'm just not making progress. And they say, first and foremost, every moment is stepping into a new threshold. You're crossing a threshold moment by moment. And if we can focus on the moment right now, the present moment, and let go of the past. Sometimes we just have to let go of the past, let go of the story. And what we're going to create is in this moment going forward. And each moment you're creating what you want going forward. So it's the present moment as we walk forward in our lives. In this moment, what am I creating? In this moment, what am I creating? And that is like eternal creation in this moment, in this moment, in this moment. And that's eternity. And that's the power of now. Part you've heard that phrase. But so he's saying that if we really want to just step into our power is now. He's emphasizing that in all capital letters. Right now, where's my energy and what am I holding and what is my intention? And when I set an intention once for myself I was on a healing journey in Costa Rica. We can talk about that later. I set the intention with the shaman that I want to walk in joy. And it was the most transformative night in ceremony that night to align with joy, to validation by the horn.
We love it. Signs and symbols everywhere.
Yep. So, and that's what I said, in this moment, I am joy. It's present tense. I am joy. I am love. Humans complicate it. We get attached to outcomes, trying to manifest things that are like physical nature. And I'm like,
we're so good at that.
Just keep it simple.
Yeah.
I am love. I am joy. I am light. That's when I say every day, I am the light every day. That's my get up mantra. I am the light. And that centers me up in that flow state to the best of my ability.
Yeah. It's that simple. It is that simple.
It is.
It's that glorious, but it actually feels glorious, which is crazy.
Yeah. And that is true. Spirit is simple. the human intellect tries to unpack things and try to understand and goes deep and wanders and many tangents. And
Lots of steps.
Keep it simple. In this moment, I am joy. In this moment, I am love. And in this moment, I am light. And then what does that feel like? It's a feeling.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a feeling. Embody that. So that is my final statement.
So beautiful. So beautiful. Well, I am in the presence of gratitude and joy from this conversation. So thank you so much.
Oh, thanks for hosting. This is a lot we covered today. And as you know, and I'm sure your guests know that.
Yeah.
This is a lot we could talk about for a long time.
Oh my gosh. I feel like we barely scratched the surface.
We barely scratched it.
I love hearing your perspective and your experience, and the way you approach this is so graceful. So thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Let's do it again.
We will. We certainly will. And where can people find you if they want to have in-person sessions with you in Seattle, or if they are remote?
Okay. So I am Fremont, Seattle, down here in beautiful Fremont, center of the universe.
They call it the center of the universe.
Center of the universe. Literally, that's what they call it down here. There's spaceships and everything down here. It's quite funny.
Statue, yeah.
Solid, yeah.
Is that still there?
It is.
Okay.
Yeah, and they're constantly cleaning the graffiti off of it.
I don't know why.
Yeah, really, eye roll. But my website is just Cathy Mesick -energyintuitive.com.
And how do you spell that? I'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah, it's just Cathy with a C. So Cathy Mesick, MESICK -energyintuitive.com. That's my website. You can book online through there if you want to book a session.
Yep.
I'm happy to answer questions. I have a little email form. You can shoot me an email. I'm going to answer questions. And pardon me, I have a client coming in for my 6 o'clock.
All right, we will wrap it up. And again, Cathy's info will be in the show notes. You can always shoot me a DM too, and I'll probably get back to you after a few days.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's where people can find me. So
perfect.
Gratitude for you and your guests.
Thanks everyone who joined, and we will see you next time. Until then, enjoy your light.
That's right. Love and light.
Bye.
Thanks so much for listening to today's episode. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave a review, and make sure you've signed up for the newsletter for special insights, offerings, and announcements that are just for you.